Natalie Chong is a passionate youth climate advocate committed to environmental education and policy advisory in Asia. She founded VER in Hong Kong and was recently named one of the most important young sustainability leaders in APAC. Very impressive, Natalie, and thank you very much for joining us today. Can you remember when you first realized that you would really commit your career and your life, in fact, to being a climate and an environmental activist?
So it was actually quite back in my life. When I was in primary 5, I conducted a school project on climate change. What can we do? And then our teacher reached out to a polar explorer in Hong Kong, who is the first woman in the world, in fact, to have been to the 3 poles, which are the North Pole, South Pole, and Mount Everest. She's Dr. Rebecca Lee, and we had an interview together. She showcased to us the impact of global warming on the Arctic and the Antarctica. And she used a very fascinating and memorable analogy, which says, we're living in a microwave with continually rising temperature near the verge of explosion. And at that time, as a primary 5 student, I was so intrigued by this analogy, and I started to be worried about our future. Since then, I started to be concerned about climate change related news and also pursue geography from my high school, and eventually decided to pursue this path by doing a bachelor's degree in geography as well as a master's in environmental management.
Wow, grade 5. That is very, very impressive. I think I was doing nothing as inspirational as that at that young age. In fact, we interviewed someone else who was very inspirational the other day, Joanna Ruxton, who is part of the Antarctic Climate Expedition that you are also part of with Dr. Sylvia Earle. And she talked to us about the importance of education to drive better understanding and thereby hopefully drive a much better relationship between us and our oceans. Now, education is clearly at the heart of what you do too. Can you maybe share a little bit about that and what you do?
Yeah, definitely. I look up to Joanna a lot and the work that she's been advocating for in ocean education. So I founded an environmental organization, a youth-based initiative back in 2015, after joining a creative challenge held by the French consulate. So you can tell from the name that we sound a bit French, and that's where our name came about. We realized that a lot of Hong Kong people are aware of our footprint on the environment, but very few people are able to link the relationship between aviation, their travel habit, to greenhouse gas emissions. And from one of our local research, we found that actually 25% of our individual carbon footprint comes from flying overseas, because Hong Kong is a small city. A lot of people would do weekend getaways before COVID. So we're hoping to encourage the public to adventure even within our city, because once you've been to these parks, you understand the importance to conserve it. Most people would think Hong Kong is an urban jungle. We actually have 70% of our land is as green belt. We've organized over 200 tours in the past 5 years, reaching over 10,000 people.
You talk about Hong Kong there. Do you notice any major differences in the younger generation's attitudes comparing China and elsewhere?
I guess in China, maybe activism is not promoted as much as in European regions. So most people I know, they mostly focus on research, for example, like doing climate system modeling to project the amount of greenhouse gas that needs to be reduced in order to reach carbon neutrality. And a lot of my friends in China, they're working on renewable energy, because as you know, the cost declines in renewable energy in the past decade was very exponential. From my experience of attending COP25 in Madrid back in 2019, I realized that Hong Kong youths are quite far behind international youths in their kind of momentum to drive policy changes. Because in Hong Kong, we don't get a lot of experience to attend international conferences. And during COP, I saw how 16, 15-year-old teenagers from the UK, from Philippines. They're already writing very advanced policy suggestions and submitting to their ministers for the environment. So after that, I actually gathered a few of the other youth advocates in Hong Kong to set up the Hong Kong Youth for Climate Action, so that we can also start doing some capacity building work, allowing Hong Kong youths to connect with the international community and the international climate movement, and starting to learn these skills of writing policy papers, of communicating with senior officials, so that our voices are heard in a community.
I know how you're going to answer this last question of mine. How hopeful are you that your generation will really bring about, I think, a turning point in our environmental predicament? Are you essentially positive about that?
And I get asked this a lot.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I actually do believe that we are able to drive this transformation. For instance, I was one of the few youths who actually volunteered by cold emailing NGOs in Hong Kong, asking if we can attend COP25. Now, and the NGO that we went to COP25 with already set up a program with our advice on training climate youth advocates in Hong Kong, with a whole structured program for 3 to 4 months. And eventually they'll select the best performers to attend COP. So we are sending an official Hong Kong youth delegation to these COP conferences and making our influence. Even if Hong Kong government didn't send any official representation, but we now have youths to represent our entire city and what we can contribute in building climate resilience and sharing our city's experience to other, maybe less developed regions. As long as we give the space and ownership to youths to take up a project, they can actually use their creativity to amplify the impact. When we're talking about reaching carbon neutrality or gaining net zero, it's very important to have this paradigm shift. We are shifting the entire operation model, like how the world used to work, and a lot of path dependency that we have to break through. And studying at Oxford, I was also inspired by a lot of innovative scholars. For example, Kate Warworth, she proposed the concept of donut economics, where we should live in a place where we meet social foundations, the social needs of people, but at the same time don't exceed the planetary ecological boundaries of our planet. And Amsterdam, the city of Amsterdam, actually adopted this donut economics model in planning for their green recovery after COVID. Seeing these kind of case studies where city governments are daring to make changes, and also youths pushing behind the scene with their climate movements, activism, as well as policy advocacy work, I'm very positive that we are able to be the generation driving the change, especially by pushing a political agenda towards a green recovery after COVID.
I'm much more confident that actually the world is in good hands. And actually talking to others on your expedition, actually that feeling of hope was very much there. Thank you so much for joining me today. It has been absolutely brilliant. I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you to everyone for listening.
Thank you so much.